Welcome to Evo 1. Today we are talking about the upcoming proposed regulations surrounding e-bikes. Specifically, we're going to be discussing Class 1 as well as Class 3 e-bikes and how these proposed regulations could impact anyone who rides or owns one. Before we get too far down the trail here, we need to understand the different distinctions between the different classes of e-bikes. You have Class 1, which is an assist up to 20 miles an hour. You have Class 2, which is a throttle assist up to 20 miles an hour, as well as Class 3, which is going to be assist up to 28 miles an hour. Now, whenever we break down these different categories, specifically here, I want to really hone in on Class 1 as well as Class 3 because it's what most of my viewers out there ride. Now, I could definitely go through the entire proposed regulation report, but it was honestly looking longer than a Monday, so I've got some cliff notes here that I'm going to go over with you. And what I really want to focus on is the fact that the Consumer Product Safety Commission here took 100 accidents, fatality accidents, from 2017 to 2022, and that's what they're basing all of their data on. Now, what's interesting to note is most of these fatality accidents involved either a vehicle, a collision with a solid object such as a pole, stop sign, curb, a pedestrian, which that sucks, and one rider ejection. What's really interesting is out of 100 accidents, only 16 actually had helmet data, like whether they were wearing a helmet or not. So I find it interesting that they're basing it off of 16% for one of their proposed regulations, so keep that in mind. So there is actually a body involved here called the ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, and it applies to the United States as well as the EU. Now, they currently have mandatory as well as voluntary regulations for e-bikes as well as bicycles in general. However, the Consumer Product Safety Commission says that's not enough. That's not great news. Now, what exactly are the fun suckers over at the Consumer Product Safety Commission proposing, and what are they looking at for the implications here? The implications they're looking at are, as far as visibility goes, is the bike visible to a motor vehicle, a pedestrian? Is it running reflectors? That's essentially what that means. And I don't know anything else other than trying to run just everything fluorescent yellow or day-glow orange to really enforce that. I mean, bikes come with reflectors and they're going to ship them with reflectors. In fact, I'm 99% positive they still do, and we just take them off. So, not that big of a deal. Size and weight of the rider as well as the e-bike. Now, this one's interesting because they use the same 170-pound standard to get their 20 and 28 mile an hour marks that they've used for acoustic bikes for years. And so this one, you can argue it a couple different ways. How do you restrict somebody if they're either overweight or underweight for that bike, right? Like, how do you set that standard as well as monitor it? Do you put in a seat weight system to where you can measure the rider weight? I mean, that's a challenge. Or do bike shops at that point, or in sales, do they have the ability or the responsibility to then calibrate the bike to the rider weight, or do you have to input what your weight is? I mean, that one's a little silly, honestly. Rider weight too, I mean, it varies on whether you've eaten, do you have a pack on? I mean, have you gone on a 30-day, cleanse? That one's a little goofy, but they are looking at it. Speed and acceleration of the e-bike. This one is interesting because it seems like they're more so referring to how the propulsion system kicks in. And I recently rode like a rocky mountain and it was on ludicrous mode. And I'll tell you, I mean, I could one hand uphill crank those pedals and I could kind of pull the front wheel up. So that one's interesting, but also again, that is kind of subjective to rider capability, control, skill level in a lot of different ways. So really, how do you regulate that, especially on a bike that's got gears? The big one here, and I think the one that's really might actually gain some traction, well, that's a bad pun, braking. Now, braking, e-bikes, you do burn through brakes quicker. I mean, it's just a fact. And that's because you generally carry more speed and you're going a lot quicker in places that you normally wouldn't, and that's not a bad thing. It's a lot of fun. But you do burn up brakes. We recently saw SRAM come out with their Maven line of brakes meant for acoustic downhill bikes, and if that is going to be the kind of upper echelon or upper tier for acoustic bikes, does that mean that it now needs to be kind of low to mid tier on e-bikes? Because that's going to get expensive really, really quick, and if so, brake manufacturers really need to step their game up. Bicycle component durability. This one is interesting because yes, e-bikes do typically eat cassettes, derailleurs, and chains a lot quicker and kind of ties back into brakes as well. But there are already a lot of companies that are producing parts that are meant to hold up to the rigors of e-bikes, as well as the increased torque, the greater strain on brakes. I don't think that one's as big of a deal because we already have companies that have kind of stepped up to the plate and started supporting that and engineering for it ahead of this, so that one's great, but it is something to think about. The next one that they're looking at is structural integrity. That one, I already think that a lot of manufacturers do a really good job of reinforcing where motor mounts are. They do a great job of beefing the frame up, and so I don't know if at that point maybe they're looking at some crash data of like head tubes or frames getting stressed, but then again, that is subjective. If I have a bike that I only ride on the street or down some really light green trails, but then I've also got the same bike and then I take it down a bunch of blacks and double blacks and I beat on it and jump it all the time, which frame's gonna break sooner on the same bike? The last thing that they're looking at here is helmet performance. Now, do you remember that pretty little 16%, the 16 out of 100 that I gave you a few minutes ago? That's what they're using to look at helmets. I think that everybody and any rider worth their salt probably understands the fact that if you make a good investment in a helmet and you get either DOT or MIPS, you're probably gonna be pretty solid, okay? And I also don't necessarily think that 16% out of 100 is really enough data to look at and evaluate whether there need to be new helmet standards, right? And now that we've covered all of the implications here, I think we really need to look at what they're proposing as far as a alternative. Now, this is where I've gone through this like 5 or 6 times, and they give you an option A, which is standards for children's bikes. They give you an option B, which is going to be standards again for the product for children. Then they give you option C, which is improved voluntary standards, but then they go on to say that the commission already finds those inadequate. Option D is going to be regulatory actions, meaning recalls under the existing laws. And then option E is public awareness. Now, I feel like they've already tried option E. I feel like A, B, and C, they use C to negate A and B. So they are basically on here saying that option D, recalls, are kind of their best bet. Now, that is highly, highly frightening because, they do have grounds. They have grounds because they've used for years the same standards that acoustic bikes are held to, and they've just applied them to e-bikes because, we just do a little motor on there. But, motorcycles are in a different category. Yeah, I don't know what to think here. Let me know what you think down below in the comments section, and I'm also going to drop a link down below because the comment period for these proposed regulations is not over yet. We still have a little bit of time, I think it's a little bit over a month, to actually go and advocate as well as share our opinion, and hopefully somebody can provide a better solution than recalls, because that one sucks. So let me know again your thoughts down below in the comments. Go check out that link. Add a comment on there. Maybe we can figure out a better alternative here, because quite frankly, this scares the crap out of me, because that would be a recall on a massive scale. And the scariest part is e-bike sales are essentially like one of the only things that have carried a lot of these large manufacturers through over the past 12 to 18 months. So that's all I've got for you. Again, let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I will see you on the next video.